Hi everybody, welcome along to our little press conference today. To nobody's surprise, a lot of people have turned up for our guest, Beat Takeshi. While it's taken the FCCJ nearly 20 years to get Mr. Takeshi to appear here, he was first invited back in 2005, but it's surely worth the wait. He is, of course, better known, well, his real name, of course, is Kitano Takeshi, but he's better known as Beat Takeshi. He is one of Japan's best-known artists and has been described, probably to his horror, as a national treasure. He began his professional life as a satirical comedian and a TV host on TV, of course, Japanese TV, but his ambition took him far beyond those roots into an international career in acting and filmmaking. His first international acting role was in Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, when he played a camp guard to David Bowie's Prisoner of War. He has evolved into an acclaimed writer, director, poet, artist, and he is best known, of course, outside Japan as a filmmaker of mainly Yakuza and crime movies. His directorial debut was Violent Cop, which earned him a reputation as an anti-hero in the sort of Clint Eastwood mold. He won a Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival for Hanabi in 1998, and he has been dubbed the true successor to an earlier generation of brilliant Japanese filmmakers. His fans include Quentin Tarantino, who called Sonantine from 1993. He's called it a masterpiece, which of course Kitano wrote, produced, directed, and starred in. His movies are often marked by disorientating, perverse bouts of comedy, extreme violence, and farce. His latest, Kubi, is a samurai movie set in the Warring States period. It's adapted from the book that he wrote, which is here, of course, on the counter. It will be screened in Japan from next week. Kitano-san is now 76. I don't think you mind me saying that. He was born into a working-class family in Tokyo. He dropped out of an engineering course in Meiji University to become a comedian. In addition to the Golden Globe Award, he has also won awards in France, Russia, and Italy for his contributions to film culture. So do give your, first of all, if we could start just by if you give him a warm round of applause and welcome to the FCCJ. Now, the preferred format that we decided on, our interpreter today, by the way, is Mary Joyce. Thank you very much. The preferred format that Kitano-san requested was a kind of a start with a Q&A, and then we will open between me and him, and then we will open it to the floor for everybody else. And the questions have been given to him in advance, so he kind of knows what's coming. The first question will be about his earlier work. So an older generation, is Ideska? An older generation of Japanese will know Kitano-san from stand-up comedy. Others will know him from movies. A lot of other people will probably know him from his art. What I wanted to do was start today by asking him, out of all of that body of work, is there anything that you would single out?
では最初の紹介を省略させていただきます。早速司会者の方からの質問から始めさせていただきますが、まず一番最初に北野さん、上の世代の日本人の方は漫才でもちろん一番していると思いますし、海外の方ですと映画で一番している、またはアートの方で美術の方で一番しているという方もいると思いますが、そういったさまざまな作品の中で特に印象に残っているというものはどういったものでしょうか。
はじめまして、ジャニー北野川です。
First of all, nice to meet you. My name is Johnny Kitano.
漫才というのが日本のスタンダップコメディっていうと向こうがアメリカとか欧米は一人なんだけど、日本は漫才というローレル・ハーディンとかアボット・コステロとかそういう感じのお笑いが普通なんですけど、その漫才は まあ一番芸能の世界で入りやすかったという感じがあって、今思えば、漫才というのはやっぱりアスリートというか、ものすごい体力がいて若くないとできないというのがあって、40ちょっとでもう頭が追いつかないというか体力がないのが分かって、ちょっと映画でもやってみようかなと思って映画とかいろんなものに手を出すんですけども、本当のこと言うといろんなものをなぜやるかというと、何やってもダメだということで手を変え品を変え、なんか自分に一番ぴったりするものを模索していたということで、結局今日までこうなっちゃったということで、あまり自分の仕事には、満足というか、よくはそんなに満足してないなという。
So manzai, of course, is what could be thought of as the Japanese stand-up comedy. In the United States, maybe stand-up is often done by just one person, or there are also the forms, for example, groups such as Abbott and Costello and these combinations as well. In Japan, also, of course, this is also usually done in this combination format as well. But actually, manzai, this kind of Japanese comedy, was perhaps the easiest form of entertainment to actually get into, to become involved in. But when I think about it now, manzai is something almost like a sport. You need to be like an athlete to be able to do this. You need a lot of physical energy in order to keep that up. So this is something which you only really can do when you are younger. This is why when I passed around 40, I started to think or feel that my mind and my body was not necessarily able to keep up with what was needed for that. So I decided to try my hand at filmmaking from there. And from film also become involved in other different forms of work as well. To be honest, I think that all of the different things I tried, perhaps I wasn't necessarily so good at any of them. So I just kept trying different methods, different forms of art, and searching for the form that would match or fit myself in the best way from them. And that's kind of what's led me to where I am today. But to be very honest, I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm particularly satisfied with my own work till now.
Thank you. I teach at a women's university in Tokyo, and when I said I was going to meet you, the word that I heard often was kawaii, right? Like, because you have this image, I think you have this macho image in Japan. And I just wonder, I read, and I was very surprised to read that you had quite a serious upbringing. You were not allowed to read comics or watch movies, and your mother made you concentrate on studying, if all of that's correct. And you were going to be an engineer. Why did you rebel against that path?
私は東京である女子大学で先生をしているんですけれども、その学生たちに今度北野さんに会うんだよというふうに言った時に、一番よく学生が言った言葉は怖いという言葉だったんですね。多分日本の中で怖いイメージがあるというようなことだったんですけれども、子供の時のお話を一度伺った時に、少し驚くような内容だったんですけれども、非常に真面目な子供で漫画も映画も禁止されていて、お母様からもう勉強ばっかりするように言われて、それでエンジニアにもなるつもりだったというふうに聞いたことあるんですけれども、そのような道に背を向いた理由はどういったものだったんでしょうか。
よく言う、うちのおふくろは教育ママだったんですけど、自分はなぜか数学が得意で、数学はいつもいい成績なんで、おふくろが喜ぶんで、いつの間にか数学しかできなくなってしまって、他の科目はあまり勉強しなくなっちゃったんですけども、そういうことで大学行くときは機械科工学部を数学だけで受かったみたいなもんなんですけど、大学中にその当時は、自動車メーカー F1 とかホンダとかトヨタとか、そういう会社に入ってエンジニアになりたいなと思ってたんですが、どうも考えると技術者では大したことないし、もしかすると販売店の支配人がいいとこで車を作るような 職業というか仕事には就けそうにないということがあって、ドロップアウトというか辞めてしまったと同時に、その当時は、世界中に、フランスに行けばカルチェラタンとか、学生運動が華やかしき頃になって、日本でもいろんな社会主義運動というか学生運動があって、その影響を受けて辞めてしまったっていうのが現実です。
So it is true that my mother was indeed very focused on education, and for some reason I was always very good at maths. I always had very good results, good marks in mathematics, and this was something which of course made my mother very happy. This was actually ended up being really the only subject that I was very good at, that I could do, and I stopped really studying any of the other subjects at school from there. This meant that when I was going to university, I was able to somehow get into a mechanical engineering course, maybe just based on my marks in mathematics class there as well. But it was when I was a student first, I was thinking that perhaps I wanted to become an engineer working with automobile makers, making Formula One cars, Honda, Toyota, and so on as well. But I started thinking about whether I would really fit there, or whether I would instead perhaps be having employment at somewhere where they have very good sales for making cars, and then go into this kind of field. And as I was thinking about these kind of things, then I ended up actually dropping out from university. This was during a period where globally there was a very lively or very vibrant students movement active at the time. Of course, we had the large movement in France at the time, and here in Japan there were also various students movements, socialist movements, and so on at the time. This kind of had an influence on me in a way as well, and the reality is, well, that is what led me to leave or to drop out of university.
Thank you. You did sort of introduce yourself as Johnny Kitagawa at the start, so I'll dive right in with a question about that, because that was the big story this year in the entertainment world from which you came from. Were you surprised when that story came out, that Kitagawa Johnny had been involved in a fairly large-scale scandal involving hundreds of children?
先ほどご紹介の時にもジャニーさんのお話があったので、今年の日本の芸能界の中で一番大きな話だったジャニーさんについて一つ質問させていただきたいんですけれども、そのジャニーさんのそのスキャンダル、その何百人も子供を巻き込むようなスキャンダルが報道された時に、その時驚きなどというものはありましたでしょうか？
芸能界っていうか、ジャニーズのタレントとかそういう人たちと仕事は何十年もやってるんで、そういうことはいろいろ噂を聞くし、いろんな人からそれはよくあったことだというふうに聞くけれども、自分たちにとってはそういう世界に行ったらそれは当然あるだろうなとしか、その当時考えてなくて、最近になってそういう問題がすごい世界中大きな問題になるっていうのは時代の流れかなと思うし、昔の日本の芸能界、海外の芸能界はよくわからないけれども、日本の芸能界というのはほとんど昔は日本で猿回しっていうのはありましたけれども、あと悪いことをするとお前はサーカスに売っちゃうぞなんていう変な脅し文句があって、サーカスの人たちには随分ひどい目に遭わしたこともおふくろたちが言ったということがあるし、芸能の仕事というのはそういう奴隷ではないけれども商品として人間を扱って、それを見せ物としてお金を稼ぐという商売が芸能界だっていう昔ながらの慣習というか習慣というのが残っているんで、自分たちもお笑いの世界に入って働いた10分の1ももらえない時代があったんで、それは まあ、日本の芸能界は最近は良くなったけど昔からひどいもんだとは思ってました。
So looking at, of course, within the entertainment world, within the talents, working with Johnny's agency and so on, I have worked for many decades together with people who are part of this agency. And during this period, of course, we heard various rumors throughout the time, also various different people saying that, these kind of things are things which were occurring very often. These were things that we did hear over the time as well. In a way, even at that time, with the way that the Japanese entertainment world, people could even assume or would perhaps expect that if you are going to enter that world, that is the situation, that is what is going to happen there. Recently, both in Japan and also internationally, this has started, of course, to be globally recognized as being problematic. This is perhaps something with the passing of time, and the way that this situation is looked at is seen as something different. But from a long time ago, within the Japanese entertainment world, it was seen as something in which negative treatment, bad treatment happens. For example, there are the traditional cases of looking at the monkey handlers, and mothers would say to their children, if you do something bad, we'll send you to the circus. This is showing that being in the circus or being in the entertainment world is somewhere where you will be treated badly, where you will not have a very good situation, for example. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that it is slavery as such, but the entertainment world, particularly as it is Japan, is where people have been, or has been this culture of treating people as commodities, as something which will be shown off and from which money is made there as well. This is something which I think is still left, or there's a remainder of this within the habits or the culture of the Japanese entertainment field as well. For myself also, within the time which I have entered the field of comedy and entertainment here in Japan, there have been periods where it was not possible to laugh during that time as well. I think there has been improvements in recent years within the Japanese entertainment world, but there is very severely or bad circumstances which have existed.
Thank you. Last question for me. Your characters, many of the characters in your movie often seem kind of out of place. They feel like they don't fit into modern Japan. So I wondered do you like modern Japan?
司会者からの最後の質問になりますが、映画の登場人物の中で、今の現代日本にあまり合わないような人物もたくさん登場するように思います。そういったような中で、北野さんご自身は現代の日本はお好きですか？
いや、高額納税者にとっては本当に腹が立ちます。
Of course, as a taxpayer, there's a lot of things which make me very angry.
もう一体この税金とどうすればいいのかというのと、国の政策も自分はどうしたら自分でもよくわからないけれども、日本の高齢化社会、自分も含まれてますが、本当に年金から始まってあらゆることが破綻しているなという感じがします。
So, of course, being a taxpayer and looking at our taxes, where this goes or what should be done with this as well, when I look at the national government policies, of course, I myself don't necessarily have all of the answers, but looking at the Japanese aging society, which includes myself, of course, looking at pension and many of these other issues, there are indeed many challenges.
Thank you. So you're just going to really briefly introduce your movie, is that right? This is the new movie. You can see that Kitano-san is not only directing the movie and wrote the book, of course, but he's also acting in the movie. He wears a hairstyle a bit like mine. So just, would you be kind enough to just briefly introduce the movie?
最後ですが、クビという映画が今度日本で公開されるんですけれども、こちらの映画は、原作を書かれたということ、また監督、脚本、そして実際映画にも出られてるんですけれども、その映画のご紹介もお願いできますでしょうか。
テーマは信長明智光秀の本能寺を中心とした本能寺の変な乱だなこれ。中心とした物語なんですけども、よくNHK なんかで描く大河ドラマというのはすごいかっこいい役者を使って歴史的には実にきれい事を並べたような戦国 の物語を描くんですが、やっぱりそういうところで触れないのは信長とか、小姓という森蘭丸というのは有名ですよ。そういう人たちとか前田利家と信長の関係とか、そういう男同士のホモセクシャルの関係というのを絶対に日本のそういう大河ドラマというのは描かないんで、もっと戦国時代というのは男色というのは男同士その人に命を懸けるというような意味での男色であって、当然信長なんか子供を22人も作ってるわけだから、両党といえば両党だけどちょっと性的な関係が違うというのをほとんど日本の、テレビやなんかは描かないんで、もっと戦国時代というのはドロドロした男同士の関係とか裏切りとか、いろんなことが同時に起こってああいうふうな事件になったっていうのを、30年前に台本を書いたんですけど、それがたまには時代劇を撮ろうということで撮ってみた結果なんですが、試写会の段階ではかなり好評で非常に喜んでます。
So within this film, it focuses on the story of what is known as the Honnoji incident. They're featuring particularly the characters of Oda Nobunaga and also Akechi Mitsuhide at the time, and the different events which were occurring around that incident. When we look at the different period dramas that are often shown on television, for example, the public broadcaster NHK's Taiga dramas, they show these very cool actors showing only the beautiful aspects, the pretty aspects of these historical times, these historical situations. However, the Sengoku period of Japan, this historical period, is a time which was, of course, not only all of these beautiful things as well. And particularly what is never shown within these portrayals is looking at the relationships between men at that time, including also homosexual relationships there as well. It's widely believed or widely thought that, for example, Oda Nobunaga and his relationships, for example, with vessels such as Mori Ranmaru or Maeda Toshi and so on, the relationships between these different men at that time is something which would never be depicted on the television like on the NHK and so on. However, this was a period when, especially when men were giving up their lives for other men within these relationships that they had, also involved these kind of sexual relationships or aspects as well. Nobunaga did have 20 children at the time, so we cannot say that he was only homosexual, of course, but there are these different kinds of relationships between men, not necessarily, or a different kind of maybe sexuality that is often thought of, but this is something which would never be portrayed within the Japanese television or other media like this as well. So I wanted to delve into showing these more muddy relationships between men that were involved in this period as well, including, of course, also betrayal and the many other different things which are happening at the same time, which led to an incident, the Honnoji incident, then taking place. I actually initially wrote the script for this 30 years ago, and then was thinking about, well, when would be the time to make such a period film, and this is what led to make me at this moment as well. When we held the preview screenings, it had a very good reception, so this is something which I was also very pleased with.
Thank you. Well, we have some hands up, so I see the gentleman back there. It's working press first, by the way, so the gentleman there, then Tim, then Ilgen, and the gentleman here in the front. That's the first four. And can you keep it to one question, please? Thank you.
ご質問を一つずつでお願いします。日本語でも大丈夫です。
監督、ニコニコ動画の七尾と申します。よろしくお願いします。映画見させていただきました試写で、大変映画史上に残る作品だと思います。質問させてください。当初ですね、4月の時の会見で、監督はご自身は出演するお考えはなかったと、周囲から説得要請されて、出ることになったということをおっしゃったと思います。そこでお聞きしたいんですけれども、演ずるビートたけしさんと羽柴秀吉はどう重なり合って演技に生かされていったんでしょうか。ちなみにですね、立川談志師匠なんですが、エッセイでこう言われております。たけしの人生、その姿どこか豊臣大公と似る。そして晩年もきっとと書かれているんですが、このことはご存知だったでしょうか。よろしくお願いします。
So my name is Nana from Nico Nico Doga. I've seen the film at the preview, and I think this is really something that will be lasting in Japanese film history as well. During a press conference in April, you said that initially you had not planned to star in the film, but it was or to appear in the film, but it was others who convinced you to actually act in the film as well. I would like to ask a little bit about that, if there are particularly any parts which you as an actor beats Takeshi are actually overlapping, or if there is this kind of similarities there with Hideyoshi, the role that you play in the film. There's also an essay by Tadanshi who mentioned that about the parallels between your lives and how these come together. So I'd like to ask if you're aware of this essay and your comment in regards to it.
映画、本当は監督一本でやりたい感じもあったんですけど、やっぱり興行的にその制作会社の方でたけしさん出ないとやっぱり海外やなんかに宣伝しづらいということがあって、じゃあ出るよとは言ったんですけど、出るとなるとやっぱり自分の中ではやりやすいのは秀吉だなという、それはなんか変な昔からタレントを戦国武将になぞらえたような本がよくあって、信長が盆地の治ちゃんだとかなんかいろんなあるんですよ。なんと新助が明智光秀になっちゃうのかなと思うんだけど、俺が大抵秀吉なんですよ。だから秀吉という感じもイメージとしていろんなものを見るとやっぱり自分はやりやすいのは秀吉だなという感じがあったし、ストーリーの影の部分での悪人をやっているんで、監督も同時にやるときに結構離れて人の芝居を見られるということがあって、だから自分の時はもうどうにもならなくなってるんだけど、だから監督をやるために秀吉を選んだのとやりやすいという感じで、それは当然そうなっちゃったなという感じがします。
So first of all, when I was planning this film, I was originally only wanting to direct it. That was all that I had in mind. However, the production company said to me, actually, well, Takeshi, unless you're also appearing in the film, it will be very hard to promote this in other countries as well. So I said, well, okay, in that case, I will also play a role in the film there. And so then I was looking or thinking about the different characters, and personally within that, looking at the different options, well, playing Hideyoshi would really be the easiest or the most close or for me to play, I felt as well. This is something that, from a long time ago, there had always been comparisons made of different Japanese entertainers to characters from the samurai period as well, saying, well, maybe Shinsuke is Mitsuhide then. And usually, in most of these cases, everybody would always compare me to Hideyoshi. So in that regards, I think that as an image, it was perhaps something that was the easiest to play, or the closest in that sense as well. There is also the fact that within the story, he's playing more of a shadow or behind role there as well. And of course, when you're a director, you need to be then taking steps away in order to be watching the actor's performance, watching people's performance as well. However, you cannot do that for your own time when you are there acting there as well. So it was also partly the reason that I chose this role was also for the fact that I could take that step back, and it was a role that I could play while also being the director at the same time. So these were the two factors that came in for me to be in this role.
Thank you. Tim is next, Ilgin, and then the gentleman in front.
Tim Horniak, freelance. Speaking of acting and performing, did you ever find it to be challenging to move from some of these darker, violent characters that you've played in films and the really lighthearted slapstick comedy performances that we've seen on TV? How do you manage that?
フリーランスのティム・ホニヤクと申します。先ほどそのチャレンジなどという話もありましたが、たけしさんが演じる、登場人物キャラクターの中で、非常に暴力的に、暗いようなキャラクターもいれば、やはりテレビの中の非常に、ユーモア漫才ですとかその軽いライトのようなキャラクターもいるんですけれども、その両方を演じるその切り替えですとか、その両方をやるようなところでどのようにバランスを取られているのかということです。
シリアスなこととお笑いというのはこう表裏一体っていうか、お笑いというのは悪魔だと思ってるんですよ。で必ず悪魔はシリアスなと、結婚式とかお葬式とかみんなが緊張するようなところに必ずお笑いっていうのは忍び込んできて、お笑いに持っていってしまうという。だからチャップリンの言葉ではないけれども、ホームレスの人がバナナを踏んで全て倒れてもそんなにかわいそうだと思うけども、プライムミニスターっていうか偉い人、総理大臣とかもっと上の人がバナナを踏んで倒れるとみんな笑うという。だから暴力映画もそうですごいシリアスなシーンを撮ると同時にそこにお笑いの要素が十分、悪魔が忍び寄ってきてフィルムでは流さないけども現場では大笑いすることがいっぱいあって、今度の作ろうとする映画は暴力映画におけるお笑いというテーマで今制作に入ってます。
So within looking at both the serious aspects and the comedic aspects, I think that in a way these can almost be looked at as different sides of the same coin in an aspect. Particularly when we look at comedy, this is something that can be looked at almost like there is the devil or like a jester kind of character there as well. When we have scenes, for example, when people are very serious, such as weddings or funerals, we always then have some kind of a comedian or the devil coming in and making people laugh, even within these very serious kind of settings as well. I think that comedy comes in and brings that. That's the same as, for example, what Chaplin does. I'm not necessarily comparing myself to him in that regards, but I think that when we look at this, but when we look at how jokes are made, for example, of course, if someone homeless would be to fall and lose everything, that is not something that we would find funny. But if someone who is in a high position, like a prime minister, is to stumble and lose things in this way, then this is where people laugh. This is the kind of the relationships there that come in part of it as well. And I think it's the same thing for violent films. Even when you're filming very serious scenes, we always have on set these very comedic moments or elements that come in there as well, as the devil comes in and makes people laugh. These are not necessarily things which are actually included in the final film, which are seen in the film itself. However, on set, there will be a huge amount of laughter from people in these kind of moments as well. Actually, the next film, which I am currently working on, which is now in production, is on the theme of comedy within violent films.
なるほど。Ilgin, you're next, and then the gentleman in front.
Ilgin Yorulmaz for BBC Turkish. I also serve as the second vice president and welcome you here today. Congrats on your new movie. You mentioned a little bit about Japanese entertainment world, and I just want to ask about a sad incident, I'm afraid, which was reported recently. There are reports that one young actress of Takarazuka took her own life due to overwork and alleged bullying. Based on your experiences, the details are of course coming, but Takeshi-san, what can you say about the over-competitiveness of Japanese entertainment world for young people like this? Thank you.
BBC トルコ、そしてこちらの協会のバイスプレゼントを務めますイルギンと申します。まず新作おめでとうございます。先ほど日本の芸能界についてお話が出ましたが、最近報道された悲しい事件について伺いしたいと思います。一人の若い宝塚の女優さんが最近過労またはいじめという問題で自殺されたということが報道されています。もちろん詳細はまだ報道もされていないんですけれども、日本の芸能界の一般的な競争ですとか、その若い人たちに対するその今の日本の芸能界の在り方についてのコメントをお願いできますでしょうか。
いろいろ 日本の芸能界もまあ戦後は在日米軍のためにまあタレントを出して歌聴かせて流すような芸能プロダクションが戦後始まってからしばらくは続いたんですが、お笑いの方は漫才という形で弟子を取るというか、まあ屋号っていうのはあるんだけども、青空とかいろいろ屋号がつくところのなんだろう門下というか師匠を見つけてその弟子になるという、それでその師匠のためにいろいろ芸を教わるためにいろいろ仕事をしたり雑籍をするんですが、落語も同じような世界でいまだに落語はそうだと思うんですが、ある時期からその学校を作るようになって師匠と弟子という関係ではなくて生徒としてお金払って芸を習うという風潮が出てきて、宝塚みたいな相変わらず独立して完全に自分たちの世界を守ってる世界とは違うパワハラというのは少しはあるけれども前ほどひどくはない。だけども片っぽで古典芸能、まあ宝塚は古典とは言わないんだろうけども、そういうとこには相変わらず作法とか、礼儀やなんかに非常にうるさかったり、あとは自分がいい役をもらうもらえないとか、その競争の中でのプレッシャーとかいろいろまだいっぱい残ってる組織もいっぱいあるんですが、今の日本はその入れ替え時というかそういうのがそろそろなくなりかけて、新しい形のエンターテインメントの世界ができつつあるという。ただ映画はすごい助監督と監督の関係とか照明技師と下の関係は相変わらず徒弟制度みたいな感じで起こったり怒鳴ったりなんかしてる世界があるけれども、もう一方ネット SNS の世界がこれほどまで大きくなってくると、とにかくソフトが足りなくて、そういう助監督とかそういう人たちの仕事がもう増えて人が足りなくなってきたら、そういうパワハラとか起こったりなんかすることでみんなやめていってしまうんで、そういう面では映画の世界ではややなくなってきた、映画とかテレビの世界ではなくなってきたと思いますが、ある分野ではまだ、ちゃんと残ってるとか、相変わらずそういう先輩後輩の関係においての無理難題とか、そういうのは芸能界だけではなくて大学とか高校の運動部の中にも必ず出てくる問題で、日本は特にそれは激しいんではないかと思うんで。
I think within looking at the Japanese entertainment world, this is something which, of course, it could be said the way it is now, began in the post-war era when it was providing entertainment for the United States troops that were in Japan, sending talents there for singing for the U.S. military and so on, and continued in a way, in this sense, as part of the history or the background of the Japanese entertainment world. At the same time, the form of comedy, which is manzai, is very much related or built upon relationships between, the teacher and the disciple, for example, looking at and going into different places and how they would find, it could be said to be, a certain house in order to train, to learn from the master there within the house and learn the trade. And at that time would be, well, being taught or while learning these forms of entertainment, also taking on many other tasks and jobs within the house there, within the relationship between master and disciple. The same thing, of course, can be said for rakugo, and I think those kind of relationships or that method is still existing now in the rakugo world there as well. But from a certain time within comedy, within entertainment, it started to, rather than being in this form, they started to create schools for people to learn to be comedians, where they would come as students, pay tuition fees, and then be taught in this way. In comparison to that, Takarazuka has remained independent in a way, protecting its own world as something different from the outside world. And I think in that regards, there is certainly to some extent a level of this issue of power harassment within this world as well. Perhaps it's not as bad as it was in previous times. However, at the same time, when we look at the traditional arts within Japan, not that Takarazuka would fit within that category, but within such places, there is looking at this focus on the methods or discipline and so on. Also looking at the kind of pressure or competition in order to try and get a good role within this world and so on. There are many organizations or institutes within the entertainment world that are still very much functioning with these kinds of structures or these kinds of way. I think within Japan now, this is starting to disappear. We are really in a time of transition or a time where this is shifting, and the new form of the way of being for the entertainment world is starting to develop at the moment. It's in transition period at the moment. But within the film world, for example, if we look at the relationships between assistant directors and directors, for example, or lighting technicians and the people working under them, there is still these very strong hierarchies. There is these cases of yelling, very sort of acts there as well. But when we see also as there is more development of social media, there is more other tasks. There's not enough people necessarily to fulfill these soft jobs that are needed within the industry there as well. Therefore, when there are not enough people, this also leads or it contributes in a way to this power harassment or people quitting from this field as well. So I think in that sense, while it is not, or it's starting to decrease within the film and television industries, these kind of situations certainly still exist within certain fields within entertainment in Japan. And what is not necessarily changing is looking at, still these relationships as between the senpai, kohai, the person upper and lower as well. And this is something which is not only limited to the entertainment field, but more broadly within Japanese society as well. If we look at sports clubs, for example, within universities or schools, I think these kinds of tendencies are particularly strong in Japan.
Thank you, and thank you, Mary, for that marathon burst of interpreting. It's very hard to do. The gentleman on front, please.
Thank you. Etienne Balmer from AFP, French Press Agency. Mr. Kitano, can you develop a bit more about the concept of the new movie that you are working on right now? Can you reveal us some details of the concept and the story? And more generally, are there any themes that you want to explore in your future movies that you haven't tackled yet? Thank you.
フランスの AFP の記者です。先ほど現在制作中の映画の話が少し出ましたが、それについてもしもう少し詳しく教えていただくことができれば、あらすじですとかどのような映画、どのようなコンセプトなどについて教えていただければ、また今後将来的にも映画の中で追求したい新しいテーマなどはございますでしょうか。
今ちょっとプロジェクトでやってるのはパロディっていう映画ではよくパロディっていう言葉を使うんですが、そのパロディこの映画はあれのパロディだよってお笑いでやる場合、その元がかなり有名な映画であったり、風と共に去りぬとかローマの休日だとか大ヒットした E.T. だとかジョーズとかそういうものから持ってきてそれのパロディというものをよくやるんですが、自分が考えるのはそれだとすごい持ってくる題材っていうか映画がヒットした映画ではないとパロディにならないということがあって、一番いいのはまず半分の時間を自分の場合はギャング映画かそういう暴力映画を撮ってそれと同じキャスティングとストーリーでパロディを同時に2部で流してみるということを今やってるんですが、なかなか、難しいこともあるけど これはやりたいというものはどうにかなりそうだなっていうのと、今それがパロディに対する新しい方法として自分の一部をちゃんと取ってそのパロディをやるんならみんな知ってる作品から取ったってことになるんでいいかなというのと、新しいプロジェクトというのはやっぱり日本はバブルの時代とか80年代とかその時代に反社会的グループとか芸能界とかそういうのがそういう人たちが入り乱れてまあいろんなことがある時代があるんだけど、それは今台本を作ってる最中だし、まあ映画はいろんな可能性があるんでいろんなものを作りながらひらめいたことをメモっていつかそれを実現させようとする努力はしてます。
So the project I'm working on at the moment is a parody film. But when we talk about parodies, when we use that word, it's often talking about a parody of a film which was a big hit, something that everybody knows. Whether it's Gone with the Wind, Roman Holiday, E.T., Jaws, these kind of films which everybody is familiar with, which were a big hit. And it is because they are something famous that they can be then brought and made into a parody in that way. However, what I am looking at in doing this is bringing a new kind of content or a new kind of way of approaching parody in this. And what I thought the best way to do this would be for the first half of the film to be actually a gang violent film, and then within that same film the second half is using the same cast, the same story, but a parody of this. So it's actually having the two parts within this one film, so then it can be a parody of something which everybody is familiar with because they have seen that as well. So this is a new approach to parody which I am exploring in this as well. There are some difficult elements as to this, but as in the process of making it, this is something that I want to try, and it's becoming something which I think it will be it will work in that regards as well. In regards to another new project, this is looking at the period of Japan during the bubble economy during the 1980s, when there was, of course, many different things going on within different anti-social groups at the time, the entertainment field, and so on. So I'm currently writing a script about various happenings or during that period in Japan as well. Film is something, of course, which has various potentials, various possibilities as well. So I'm going to continue to create different works like this. I find whenever I have ideas or sparks, write these down and then make efforts to bring these into reality in my film.
Thank you very much. The gentleman in front. And then the gentleman with glasses in the second row.
Yeah, James Hadfield, Japan Times. I wanted to ask about your Kasei's performance in the film Isolde Nobunaga, because it's absolutely insane. What kind of direction did you give him?
ジャパンタイムズの記者です。首の中の火星寮の演技についてお聞きしたいんですけれども、それは本当に信長の本当にもう狂っているような演技ということで、どのようにその時監督として指示をされたのでしょうか。
加瀬君は俺の映画出てる時はあの人のイメージというのはすごい純朴というか優しい青年という気のいい青年というイメージなんですが、アウトレイジで凶悪なインテリヤクザをやらしたり、今度の場合は加瀬君には冒険をしてもらって、まあ信長という狂気だと思うんですけれども、それをやってもらうについてはまず岐阜弁という実際はどういう喋りだか音声は残ってるはずはないんだけれども、まあ、言語学者の人にいろいろ聞いてこんな言葉を喋ったんではないかというまずセリフの言い方とまず完全に頭の中にセリフを入れてもらうのと、あと100メートルの競争のように 突っ走ってくれという、2回は取らないというような感じで、全部ほとんどの場合ワンテイクで終わらすというようなプレッシャーをかけて、失敗しても続けろというようにして、とにかくアスリートのような芝居をさせたんですけど、見事に応えてくれたと思ってますけど。
So, Mr. Kase, his image is of someone who is, a very pure, kind young man, is the kind of image which everybody has of him. Or in my films, I really try to, or have him take an adventure or challenge against this image as well. In Outrage, playing a very crazy Yakuza, or in this film, I'm kind of casting him in the role of the very wild Nobunaga in that regards as well. What I did first was looking at, sending from, Gifu dialect. Of course, we don't have original recordings and so on of the sound of how he would have spoken and so on, but worked together with a linguist to look at what kind of words, what kind of phrases and so on he would have been using. First of all, having him put to mind all of the lines and then look at how to say those in a way that would, so working with a linguist in regards to that. Then the next element was really having him or directing him to act like an athlete as well, almost like in 100-meter sprints. He would say, run now. We're not going to film this twice. Where almost everything in the film was actually done just in one take. And I would say, even if you fail, even if you don't do it well, we're going to keep the camera rolling. So really putting pressure in this way like an athlete. And that, I think, was what was able to bring out. And he responded very, very well in this to this method.
It sounds like you had a lot of fun, Kitano-san.
非常に楽しかったのではないでしょうか、撮影は。
まあ、なかなか、制作者側とうまく、関係がうまくいかなくて苦労した部分はあるんですが、制作現場は、北野組といって照明さんなんかは全部俺の映画しかやってない人もいるし、そういう意味では役者さんも前から俺に協力してくれた人が多かったんで、こっちが何も言わなくてもこっちの思うことを、忖度じゃないけどもちゃんと準備してきてくれて、実際画像に残っているのは大変そうに見えたけれども、現場では結構そんなに大変なことではなかったなという。
In the production period, there was various challenges in regards and with the side of things, but on the set, looking at not only the actors but also the crew who were involved in the film, for example, as we call them, the Kitano Gumi or the Kitano group. Many of even the lighting technicians, for example, were people who have only worked on my films, who only do my films, for example. And the actors in that sense were almost all people who from quite some time ago have all worked with me or cooperated with me for a very long time. Therefore, that means even without me having to necessarily say it, they can understand what it is that I'm looking for or what I am thinking, not necessarily sontako or things where people are trying to read what the boss is saying and do it on behalf of them, but really preparing well and understanding what it is that I'm striving for there. If we look at the images of the film, it can look like something, perhaps it was very hard on set, but actually the reality of how things were on set was that it wasn't that challenging at the time.
Thank you. The gentleman in the last who's been waiting, and this I think will be the last question.
これ最後の質問とさせていただきます。
日刊スポーツ村上です。よろしくお願いします。首輪の監督の今までのすべてのエンタメから暴力的要素がすべて入って素晴らしい作品で感動しました。質問なんですけども、先ほど日本のエンタメ界が入れ替えの時期にあるということをおっしゃいました。あとテレビのこととかも言及一部この会見とかされたと思うんですけども、一連のジャニーズの問題しかりですが、報道がなかなか踏み込まない。で今までのテレビなり我々新聞もそうですけども、報道の在り方を問われたり、また反省をする文を出したりとか、そういうメディアの方もいろいろ動いている時期かと思うんですけども、この報道、テレビ、その辺の方の転換、今の在り方、その辺に関してはどういうお考えをお持ちでしょうか。
My name is Murakami of Nikkan Sports. I would like to, there was commentary about the Japanese entertainment world being in a period of transition at the moment, and you mentioned about television as well. Of course, the Johnny's issue is very deeply connected with this. This is also a question about the reporting and media in Japan as well, about whether it has perhaps not as deeply or reported or looked into these issues, or it is time of questioning or even regret in a way for journalism and reporting or media here in Japan as well. So I'd like to ask your commentary about the media itself or how reporting within this situation.
まあ、エンターテインメントの世界にずっといた、まあ、今もいるんだけどとやはりメディアとその大手のプロダクションとの癒着というのは昔から目に余るものがあってまあひどいな。だからみんなタレントは大きな事務所に行って守ってもらおうとするのかなと思うんですが、まあよくあったことはカンヌ映画祭に記者を連れてってカンヌ映画祭で招待もされてないのにカンヌにある映画館で上映して日本のマスコミとか新聞ではカンヌで大好評って書いてあったり実際に言ってる我々にとってなんでこんなことが曲がり通るかなんていうことが昔はごく最近まで平気であったりあとは大手の事務所を辞めていくタレントにはメディアが一切取り扱わなくなったりいろんなテレビ局もお達しっていうか触れが回って使わないようにしようというふうになったりそれは相変わらず日本の芸能界のまあダークな部分だと思うんですが外国ではそういうことがあるのかないのかよく分かりませんが、まあ自分にとってはそういう世界でよくぞ今までやってこられたなという、なんか安心感はありますが達成感というかただ今までの日本のそういう芸能の闇の部分はどうやって取り除いていくのかっていうのは興味は非常にあります。
So within, as someone who has until now and is still of course today also part of the entertainment world, looking at this deep collusion between the media and the major production companies is of course something which has always been the case and is really something quite terrible. And so looking at, of course, that then talents or entertainers will want to be affiliated with large agencies where they think that that is where they can be protected, for example. To give one example of something which often happens there would be if we look at the Cannes Film Festival, major production companies would then take Japanese reporters to Cannes, screen their film in a cinema, even though they haven't been invited to be part of the film festival itself. But then all the Japanese media will report this film had a huge reception in Cannes, even when it wasn't even part of the actual official festival or officially what was screening there. This is something which, for those of us who were actually there at the festival, we would see this and say, what are they talking about and how can this even happen in this way? But this is something which was done very often, even till very recently. We also see the cases, for example, if talents quit or leave major agencies, then the media will stop talking about them or television channels will stop casting them in their programs, for example. And this is something which I think is the dark side of Japanese entertainment, which is perhaps not necessarily changing so much. I cannot say whether this is the same case in other countries as well or internationally, if this is similar or not. But personally, as someone who has come so far within this kind of world, I do, now when I look back, I can feel some kind of a sense of ease or achievement in the fact that I am here and have been a part of this world for this long. But at the same time, looking at the question of how to get rid of, how to remove these dark sides of the Japanese entertainment is something which until now and still I am very much interested in.
Thank you very much. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. どうぞ。
一つだけお詫びをしとかなきゃいけない。30年前か20年前か ここに招待を受けたというのを実は最近知ったことで、僕の耳に入ってるのは20年か30年前喜んでここに現れたんですけども、その当時のマネージャーなり社長なりが一切そういう情報をくれなかったんで、僕が嫌で来なかったわけじゃなくて、全然知らなくて、今回は喜んできたんであって、何年か前に断ったわけではなくて、自分の耳には入ってなかったってことですから、今回どうもありがとうございます。
とんでもないです。多分特派員協会は危ないだとかって言われたんじゃないですかね。変な質問書かれたとか。
And one thing I would like to make an apology about at the end as well, you mentioned that I was invited here 20 or 30 years ago to speak, but this is actually something I only learned of very recently. If I had known about it at the time, I would have very happily come to speak here as well. I think that perhaps the head of the company or the manager at the time just didn't tell me about this information, this invitation didn't reach me at all. So it wasn't that I didn't want to come here, I would have been very happy to come and speak there. So this time as well, I want to make it clear, it wasn't that I refused before, it was just that I didn't know. And the question is, perhaps they thought that the FCCJ was maybe a dangerous place.
And now you know we're all a bunch of puppies, right? We're lovely.
No.
So thank you very much for coming, for gracing us with your presence. There's the new movie. It's called Kubi. It's out on November the 23rd. We wish it every success and do show your appreciation to Mr. Kitano for finally coming to the FCCJ. Thank you very much.